First call for you is on our line for those who support Senator Obama. It's Grand Rapids, Michigan. Go ahead.
Good morning. George Will was in Grand Rapids on Thursday, and our local paper had a quote that just really floored me. I'd like you to comment on it. This was following McCain's call for the FCC chairman, Christopher Cox's resignation. George Will said, this is why some thoughtful conservatives have grave doubts about his ability to be president. This is regarding McCain. In his speech, Will said McCain worries conservatives because he's someone who can so polarize every argument into a kind of moral melodrama. You can't have honest difference of opinion with John McCain. This is very difficult because to disagree with he who is honor personified is inherently dishonorable. I'll take your comments off air. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you for the question. I don't often find myself saying this, but I agree with George Will 100%. And if you see the subtitle of my book, Why Conservatives Don't Trust Him, they were a lot of the first ones that saw who McCain really was, because he would make promises and he would act like he was one of them. And then what he does is, when he breaks with people and decides it's better for him or his political career or the press he wants to get that day, he doesn't just break with you. He does it in a very high-profile way and often attacks you personally. He did that with a number of political figures. So for George Will to bring it up, there are plenty of others on the record. Some of them are now coming around and supporting him. I think David Keene of the American Conservative Union made a comment at one point about how you couldn't trust McCain on a number of these issues because he was so impulsive. You didn't know if he would suddenly just snap and go against you. I think it ties into greater issues of his temperament, which I talk a lot about in my book, where when conservatives in his own party disagreed with him, he became either used profanity with them or he became violent. I mean, he physically made contact with Senator Chuck Grassley, who wouldn't speak to him for years, bumped up against him when they disagreed. And Chuck Grassley is known for being a pretty mild-mannered guy. Another one, Thad Cochran, senator of Mississippi. These are all Republicans, mind you. Said, at the time, the thought of McCain as president of the United States sends a cold chill down my spine. I don't want his finger anywhere near the button. Former Senator Bob Smith of New Hampshire, Republican, said that McCain's temper should disqualify him. You can find comments like this everywhere. You know, both Senator John Cornyn of Texas and Pete Domenici of New Mexico wouldn't talk to McCain for long periods of time because he used profanity against them and got in a physically threatening posture. He even at one point knocked Strom Thurmond, who was at the time in his 90s, to the floor of the Senate. So this has been a pattern with McCain. I broke two stories in my book. One where, just for disagreeing with a congressman who was in his delegation, Rick Renzi, who later became a friend, he physically assaulted him. And another one where, I won't use the word, I never would use the word here, but he referred to his wife in front of a group of people, let's say with a very disgusting word for a woman that you would never ever use, not only if you have a wife. If you were me, you'd be kicked out of the house. You wouldn't use it in mixed company ever. And he referred to her that way. He's someone you can't trust from one moment to the next that he's going to do something like this. He's just too impulsive.
Call Myrtle Beach, South Carolina for our line for those who support Senator McCain. Go ahead.
Yes, sir. Back in 2000, you were in favor of John McCain, and now you're not. That would seem to me that you're a flip-flopper also. Also, I'd like to know if C-SPAN is going to put on a fact check like we had a few weeks ago when there was a Republican book out there that was damning Obama. We had fact check on right the next segment afterwards. And I'm curious, Pedro, are we going to have fact check the fact this gentleman's reports, considering that his own recognition that he didn't check any of his facts, there was too much out there, so he made up his own things that he wanted to talk about. There was too much out there.
Go ahead, Mr. Schecter.
Are you claiming I said that?
He's left us, so go ahead with your thought.
The claim that I said there was too much out there, so I didn't check my own facts, I'm not sure what planet this nice gentleman's living on. I have, I don't know, over 200 footnotes in my book, unlike Mr. Corsi, who you had on, who in many places didn't footnote or took secondhand accounts. I think I dare anybody to look through and find that everything is thoroughly footnoted. The reviews have led to that. There are a couple places where I had to speak to reporters off the record, And I did because they were scared for their jobs. And in those cases, I'll ask you to say, choose. Decide if you trust me, which if you don't want to, don't. Or decide if what I say about McCain's temper in those areas fits into the pattern of everything that's already been reported, which I would say it does. I'm trying to think what his earlier questions were. I think I've lost what else he was asking me. But,
let's go to Phoenix, Arizona.
Good morning. I have a
Good morning. How are you?
About the senator. We have a president right now who was slighted by his family that he thought they want Jeb Bush to be in the office. That is why he ran. Now, McCain, I believe, is trying to push some to his dead parents. He could make it past captain in the Navy with all the pull. So, for me, the concern is we have Bush who ran against his parents and slighted them. He refused to take the advice. Now we have McCain who is doing the same thing. He couldn't make it past captain.
Thank you, Phoenix. Mr. Schecter.
Yeah, well, I'll say that, I mean, not only is McCain refusing to take advice in Iran when even the Bush administration is willing to talk, so he's to the right of them. You know, he's out there thinking it's funny when he's singing songs about bomb, bomb, bomb Iran, which, when you're dealing with foreign policy, singing songs about bombing Iran really isn't funny. Just because you mishear a question, like he did the other day on the phone about the Spanish prime minister digging in your heels and not admitting that you didn't hear it right and trying to actually start an incident with a NATO ally, that's not someone we want near the button. Somebody who's willing to say we're all Georgians and immediately chastise Russia, and whose vice presidential candidate has said we'd be willing to go to war, which I presume would be nuclear war with Russia over Georgia. I mean, these are the people that you're voting in. So, yes, you should know that. If you vote for John McCain, there will be more wars. He has a group of people advising him, all of whom have said we should either be going into Syria or Iran, or some of them have been crazy enough to say that we should be preemptively launching against North Korea. So we should be ready for that. The last thing I want to say quickly is I remembered finally what my earlier caller said about my being a flip-flopper. And what I would say about that is that when you change your opinions because you learn a whole bunch of new information about somebody, that's called being smart, I would think. That's called being a human being that uses reason. My problem is when you change your positions because somebody's giving you money or because you've got a better chance of getting elected, and it has nothing to do with what the logical truth is. So that would be my answer to that.
Our line for those who support Senator Obama, Jupiter, Florida.
Good morning. Hello?
Good morning.
Good morning. Hi. Thank you for having me on. I have more of a comment than I do a question for Mr. Schecter. I've come to pretty much the same conclusion as you have regarding Senator McCain. At what point I felt as though that he was a politician who can probably bridge the gap with bipartisanship and start to bring people together, but his record just doesn't square with his actions, and nothing seems to be more evident than some of the actions that he has taken lately with some of his statements, total contradiction to what he's done in the past. And I don't think anything underscores his desire to be president, by sake of political expediency, by picking Sarah Palin. Just doesn't make any sense. And his position and his comments regarding the economy lately, and the mudslinging that he's thrown towards Obama doesn't really square. And I think he's setting himself up to shoot himself in the foot, because so far no one has talked about the Keating 5 issue except for you. And I think that that's one thing that's really going to backfire on him if he continues to speak about, how it's somebody else's fault, and he was right at the center of something that was very similar, although not as disastrous as now.